A billionaire strolled into her diner, but when his wallet accidentally flipped open, something inside made her freeze. A photo of her mother. Zoe Carter wiped the last cup on the counter and looked around the small diner. It was late at night, and most of the tables were empty. The diner was quiet, except for the soft hum of the old neon sign outside. Zoe was tired. She had worked a long shift, but she still had to clean before going home. The diner was her place to work and meet people. It was not fancy, but it was cozy. The walls had pictures of old movies, and the smell of coffee was strong. Zoe liked her job, but sometimes it was lonely. Just as she was about to turn off the lights, the bell above the door jingled. Zoe looked up quickly. A man walked in. He was different from the usual customers. He wore a sharp black suit that looked very expensive. His shoes shined, and his hair was neat. He looked like someone important. The man did not smile or say hello. He walked to a table by the window and sat down. He looked out the window without speaking. Zoe felt curious, but also a little nervous. Zoe walked over and asked, "Can I get you something?" The man nodded once and said, "Black coffee, no sugar." Zoe smiled softly and went to get the coffee. She carried the steaming cup carefully and placed it on the table in front of him. The man didn't look at her, but gave a small nod. He reached into his pocket to pay. As he pulled out his wallet, a small photograph slipped out and fell on the floor. Zoe bent down quickly and picked it up. Her heart stopped. The picture was of a woman. She had warm eyes and a kind smile. Zoe knew that face well. It was her mother. Zoe's mother, Evelyn Carter, had always been quiet and gentle. She took care of Zoe alone. Zoe never knew much about her mother's past. Evelyn never talked about anyone else. Now here was a stranger with her mother's photo. Zoe looked up at the man. "Where did you get this?" she asked, her voice shaking. The man looked at her for the first time. His eyes were sharp and cold. He looked surprised, almost caught, off guard. "You must be mistaken," he said quickly and slipped the photo back into his wallet. Zoe's heart pounded. She knew it was no mistake. "Who are you?" she asked. The man did not answer. Instead, he took a $100 bill and placed it on the counter. "Keep the change," he said, then stood up and walked to the door. Zoe called after him, "Wait, please tell me." "Who are you?" He turned briefly and said coldly, "Forget this," then walked out into the night. Zoe stood frozen. So many questions filled her mind. Why did he have the photo of her mother? Who was he? What did he want? That night, Zoe could not sleep. She sat by her small kitchen table with her laptop. She typed the words Richard Lawson and Billionaire into the search bar. She searched through pages and pages of news stories. Finally, she found him. Richard Lawson was a very rich man. He owned many buildings and companies in California. People said he was powerful and famous, but there was no mention of Evelyn Carter anywhere. Zoe wondered why. Why did Richard have her mother's photo if he didn't want people to know about her? The next day, Zoe went to a big building. It was shiny and tall with glass windows that reflected the blue sky. This was the home of Lawson Global Enterprises. Zoe walked inside and asked to see Richard Lawson. The receptionist looked at her with surprise and said no, but Zoe didn't give up. She saw a young man distracted by his phone and quickly told him, "I am here to get a report. I think you left it at the front." The young man looked confused, but nodded and took Zoe with him past the security. Her heart beat fast as they went up in the elevator. When the doors opened, Zoe saw a big office. Richard Lawson stood there. Zoe stepped forward and held up the photograph of her mother. "Do you know her?" she asked. Richard looked at the photo, then at Zoe. He was quiet for a moment. Then he nodded slowly. "Yes, I knew Evelyn," he said softly. "I loved her," he added, his voice full of sadness. Zoe felt shocked. She had come for answers, but was not ready for this. Richard told her that long ago his family did not like Evelyn. They told him to leave her or lose everything. He chose to leave. He thought he could come back one day, but by then Evelyn was gone. Zoe's hands clenched tightly. Her mother had stayed alone while Richard lived in a big house. Evelyn never told Zoe about Richard. She had tried to protect her. Zoe's heart hurt, but the story was not over. That night Zoe looked through her mother's old things. She found a small wooden box covered in dust. Inside was a soft velvet pouch. Zoe opened it carefully. Inside was a silver necklace with a small pendant. On it, the words, "Forgive, love, begin," were engraved. Behind the pendant was a faded photo of a man. Zoe's breath caught. It was her father. A note lay beside the necklace. It was from her mother. "This belonged to your father," it said. "I kept it for you. One day you will understand." Zoe felt her world change again. Richard Lawson was not just a stranger. He was her father. The next morning, Zoe felt a mix of hope and fear as she walked back to Lawson Global Enterprises. The silver necklace hung around her neck, its small pendant shining softly in the sunlight. It was like a key to a door she had never opened before, a door to her past, to her family's secrets. Zoe pushed open the big glass doors of the building and walked up to the receptionist. She felt brave, but also nervous. "I need to see Richard Lawson," Zoe said firmly. The receptionist looked at her with surprise. "Do you have an appointment?" she asked. "No," Zoe said, "but I need to speak with him. It's important." The receptionist shook her head. "I'm sorry, he's very busy." Zoe's heart sank. She knew it wouldn't be easy, but this time she had a plan. Without another word, Zoe took off the necklace and placed it on the receptionist's desk. The small pendant caught the light and sparkled. "Tell him his daughter is here," Zoe said quietly, but with strong eyes. The receptionist looked down at the necklace, then slowly picked up the phone. After a few moments, she nodded and said, "Please wait here." Moments later, a tall man in a sharp suit appeared. It was Richard Lawson himself. He looked surprised to see Zoe, but did not say a word. He turned and walked toward the elevator. Zoe followed, her heart pounding. In his office, Richard closed the door and turned to Zoe. She placed the necklace on his desk and said, "This belonged to my mother, and I am her daughter." Richard's face changed. He looked tired, like he had been carrying a heavy weight for a long time. "I did not know," he said quietly. "I didn't know Evelyn was pregnant." Zoe's eyes filled with tears. "Why didn't you try to find us? Why didn't you come back?" Richard sighed deeply. "I wanted to, but I was afraid. My family said they would have stopped me. They wanted me to be someone else, someone without ties to her." Zoe listened as Richard told his story. He grew up in a family that cared a lot about money and power. They wanted him to marry a woman from a rich family and live a perfect life. Evelyn was different. She was kind and simple. They didn't accept her. Richard loved Evelyn, but he felt trapped. His family gave him an impossible choice: leave Evelyn or lose everything. "I chose wrong," he said, his voice breaking. "I thought I could come back when I was ready. But Evelyn was gone. I looked for her, but she kept away. She wanted to protect you from me." Zoe felt a mix of anger and sadness. Her mother had suffered quietly, protecting her even from her own father. "Why didn't she tell me?" Zoe asked softly. Richard looked down at the necklace. "She was brave. She did what she thought was best." The room was heavy with silence. Zoe wanted to be angry, but she also wanted to understand. Richard reached out his hand. "I don't expect you to forgive me now, but I want to be part of your life if you let me." Zoe looked at his hand. She remembered the words on the pendant. "Forgive, love, begin." Slowly, she took his hand and shook it. "I'm willing to try," she said. Over the next few weeks, Zoe and Richard began to learn about each other. It was not easy. There were many questions and feelings to sort through. Zoe wanted to know about her father's life, his work, his dreams, and his regrets. Richard wanted to know about Zoe, her hopes, her struggles, and the life she had built. One afternoon, Richard took Zoe to a quiet park near his office. The sun was warm, and the trees swayed gently. "I want to tell you more about your mother," Richard said. Zoe listened closely as Richard shared stories Evelyn had told him long ago. How she loved to paint flowers, and how she dreamed of a simple life filled with love. "She was stronger than I ever knew," Richard said. "She kept going for you, even when things were hard." Zoe smiled softly. She felt closer to her mother. In that moment, Richard also told Zoe about his own childhood, how he had been taught to hide his feelings and always appear strong. "I was scared of losing everything," he said, "but I lost the most important thing instead." Zoe reached out and took his hand. "It's never too late," she said. One day, Zoe found an old letter tucked inside a book in her mother's things. It was addressed to Richard. Evelyn's handwriting was neat, but full of emotion. She wrote about love, about pain, and about hope for Zoe's future. "I forgive you," the letter said, "but I hope you can forgive yourself too." Zoe felt tears come to her eyes. She read the letter again and again. That letter helped Zoe see her parents not just as strangers, but as people who had made mistakes, but loved her deeply. Zoe knew her journey was just beginning. She wanted to build a new family, a new story, one filled with truth, forgiveness, and love. That night, Zoe sat by her window holding the silver necklace. She whispered the words softly. "Forgive, love. Begin." She knew it would take time. There would be hard days and sad days. But she was ready. For the first time in her life, Zoe felt the possibility of a happy future, one where she was not alone, and where secrets no longer ruled her story. The days after Zoe's meeting with Richard felt different. Like a fresh breeze had swept through her life, carrying away some of the heaviness she had carried for so long. But even as she felt hope, she knew the journey ahead would not be easy. There were still many questions to answer, many feelings to understand, and a new family to build from the pieces of the past. Zoe woke up early one morning, the silver necklace warm around her neck. She looked out her window at the city waking up below. Today was a special day. She was going to meet Richard again, not in his office, but somewhere quiet. A place where they could talk without the weight of the past. Pressing down on them, Richard had invited her to his home, a large house surrounded by gardens full of blooming flowers. It was peaceful there, a world away from the busy city and tall glass buildings. When Zoe arrived, Richard was waiting on the porch. He smiled gently, a little nervous. Zoe smiled back, feeling a strange mix of comfort and excitement. Inside, they sat down in a cozy living room filled with books and pictures. Richard reached for a photo album and opened it carefully. "This is your family," he said softly, turning the pages. "Not just me and Evelyn, but all the people who came before us. I want you to know where you come from." Zoe looked at the pictures of people she had never met, some smiling warmly, others looking serious. She saw faces that looked like hers, with the same bright eyes and strong spirit. Richard told her stories about each person, their struggles and triumphs. Zoe listened, feeling like she was stepping into a new world, one where she belonged. After a while, Richard stood up and walked to a small desk. He came back holding a wrapped box. "I have something for you," he said, handing it to Zoe. She opened the box carefully. Inside was a small leather-bound book with her name on the cover. "It's a journal," Richard explained. "A place for you to write your own story. I want you to have something that belongs only to you, where you can keep your dreams and thoughts." Zoe touched the cover, feeling the smooth leather under her fingers. She felt a warmth in her chest, a feeling she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. I want to write everything, she said. About my past, my future, and everything in between. Richard nodded, and I'll be here to listen whenever you want to share. Over the next weeks, Zoe began to write in her journal every day. She wrote about her mother, her childhood, the night she met Richard, and all the feelings she was discovering. Writing helped her understand herself better. She wrote about her anger, her sadness, but also about forgiveness and love. One day, she wrote about a dream she had, a dream where her family was whole, where there was no more pain or secrets, only happiness. As she wrote, Zoe realized that her journey was not just about finding answers, but about creating a new future. Meanwhile, Richard was making changes too. He started spending more time away from his busy work, focusing on what really mattered, family. He invited Zoe to meetings with people who worked in his company, showing her how he was trying to build a better business, one that helped people and communities. Zoe saw a different side of Richard, not just a billionaire, but a man trying to make up for lost time. One afternoon, Richard surprised Zoe by inviting her to a charity event. It was a gathering to help children in need, something Evelyn had cared about deeply. Zoe felt proud walking beside Richard as they talked to the guests. She realized that even though their family story had been hard, they could use their strength to help others. As the months passed, Zoe and Richard's relationship grew stronger. They still had difficult conversations, but they faced them together. One evening, Richard brought Zoe to a quiet place by the ocean. The sun was setting, painting the sky with colors of orange and pink. He turned to Zoe and took her hand. "I know we have a lot to heal," he said, "but I want you to know something important. You are my daughter. I love you, and I will always be here for you." Zoe felt tears come to her eyes. She squeezed his hand and smiled. "I love you too," she said softly. The waves crashed gently nearby as if the world was listening to their promise. Back in her small apartment, Zoe kept the silver necklace close. It was more than a piece of jewelry now. It was a symbol of everything she had been through, everything she had learned. She looked at the words etched on the pendant. Forgive, love, begin. They had become her motto, her guide. Zoe knew life wouldn't always be easy. There would be challenges ahead, but she was ready. She was ready to forgive the past, to love herself and her family, and to begin a new chapter full of hope and joy. And so Zoe's journey continued, a journey of healing, strength, and new beginnings. She was no longer just a girl working late shifts at a diner. She was a daughter, a woman who had found her truth and was ready to build the future she deserved. The future was bright, full of possibilities, and Zoe was ready to face it with an open heart.